Good evening, folks. Triple Crown here, coming to you from Vancouver, British Columbia. This is a round 5 summary playtest 4 of the Global War 1939 series, and what a fun round it was. Round 5, as my good friend Bill Calloway commented, it's the round the Axis generally break out, so it is a lot of fun. Usually the Japanese sneak attack is unleashed. The Germans are attacking in Moscow, and the Allies are in a painful position, as it usually looks in most variants of this game. The Allies are under the gun early, and this is where that sort of looks the worst. So we will jump right into what the Japanese have done on turn 5. Well, they were money hungry. They decided to spring and gobble up as many of the money islands as they could. They took Borneo, they took Dutch New Guinea, and they also took Celebes. And that was very, very good for them. They did have a sizable fleet off of Borneo, about 4 destroyers, 2 naval transports, and a cruiser. And that was a sort of a suicide attack by the Dutch Navy, 4 boats, and they rolled very well. And there was one surviving Japanese transport there, so that was a successful campaign for the Dutch Navy. However, the Japanese has consolidated their navy that was sort of off Panama, and we'll get into what they did in Panama. But however, they were convoying this zone, and I think the British counterattacked the submarine there and sank it, but it was mutual destruction. And the Japanese remembered to hit all of the American convoy zones over here. The Americans did with their military base. They're still building in Hawaii, still building in the Philippines. Now, it might have been a mistake for the Japanese not to attack the Americans with their sneak attack. However, they felt it was better for them. They were in position to jump down into the money islands and take away the NO bonus for Anzac, and also start, getting wealthy. They did get their 35 IPP to start the round when they declared their sneak attack, and they went into Szechuan, which closes the Burma Road, and it really sort of hurts the KMT. And the KMT wanted no part of the Japanese stack that keeps creeping forward. However, the Japanese did go they attacked Mongolia, and even though they rolled well, the Mongolians also scored 3 hits with their defending 3 infantry, and that allowed the Mongolians are immediately activated when that happens. So they had 2 cavalry and an infantry, and the Russian infantry up here in Yakut all counterattacked, and they rolled very well as well. And so they killed the Japanese forces that went in, and the KMT forces that were in Kansu counterattacked, and they took out 4 Japanese ground units that were also in the KMT. So that was the last probably sort of major offensive by the KMT. They felt they had to do something to delay the Japanese from getting to this major factory in Novosibirsk, and they are now sort of standing pat. The British and the FEC did send 2 armor and an infantry up into Kashmir to sort of maybe head into China, or at least prevent the Japanese from coming into India. A little bit of ping pong here in Burma. The Japanese took out the British forces there, and the British retook it. So a little bit of ping pong action. The Japanese continuing to build, along these 4 factories in the Southeast Asia. They also, I never pointed out, they have 2 military bases here. You can see, just to kind of keep infantry feeding towards the front. They did build a couple more naval transports, and they did punch into Russia. So the slow slog of clearing these few remaining Russians out is sort of on the agenda. So that is what's happening in the Pacific over here in the Middle East. The British have gobbled up Iraq and all of the other Middle Eastern territories, and there's this, I think it's a pretty hefty bonus. I believe it's 5 IPP, so that is a good swing for the British. It might even be 7. The British in the Med, their whole navy is actually in this sea zone right here, but it would not all fit, so it's actually sitting over here. That's what's there, and they decided to go into Taranto, into Sicily, into Sardinia. So there's actually one space between in Anzio that's unoccupied right now. The Italians built a fortification in Rome because the British are sitting there. Actually, it's one too many infantry. With 2 infantry and 4 armor sitting in Taranto. So that is not enough to take Rome, but they do have another 4 transports over here. They can start shucking. But there's no Italian fleet left in the Med. Well, where did they go? What did the Italians do? Well, they knew the British were going to hit them next turn, and they felt it was better to survive and fight another day. So there was a German submarine here, which the Canadians cleared with a corvette and destroyer, and the Italians came in. They're all sitting in that British convoy zone box, their entire Italian navy, and that is maybe a mistake because now the British next turn can go into Turkey. So, but their navy survives, and why did their navy really do that? Well, what's going on over here? Well, Bill Calloway commented to me that maybe it was a mistake for the Allies to go down here in Argentina. And yes, you can argue this point, but it's fascinating in some ways because, the Italians get a little bit of money. They had a little bit of a navy here, which the Americans decided they had to take out. And, they lost 2 torpedo boats doing it. This is actually, I forgot to put a damage marker on this. Coastal battleship is damaged, so it can only move 1. So it's kind of, in no man's land. And now the American fleet is kind of out of position. The Japanese, I forgot to mention, actually, with their naval transport, actually landed on Panama Canal. So the American Navy was trapped on the eastern side of the Panama Canal. They can go through next turn. However, their navy wasn't as big as it was, and now they've got this problem with the Italians sitting here, and the Commonwealth and the Russians and the Canadian Navy isn't quite big enough yet to deal with it. So they're a little bit of a conundrum now for the Allies on how to deal with this, Italian Navy here, just kind of causing problems now in the Atlantic. So, it could go over here along the coast and build a naval base or an air base, and now they've got to scramble. And how are the Allies going to deal with that? The Americans, they built a couple more naval transports, which was probably a mistake. They should have built more Navy, and I knew it at the time. One of those things you, after the fact, realize. The British over here in London did do a bombing raid on Western Germany. They did 7 damage with their 2 medium bombers. The Germans got their 2 medium armor back here in Western Germany, so they're able to bring the ground units. There's 5 ground units there up to Paris or into Western Europe next turn. And they build another 3 infantry sitting in Paris. So that's a pretty formidable defense now. They've got some coastal guns, a couple of Czech hedgehogs. So that is interesting there. Well, what did the Germans do with their Barbarossa? Well, they went into Western Ukraine, and they actually only have 2 territories in Russia. And the Italians, they opened up the can opener for the Italian light armor to come through. So the Italians are now sitting in Orly-Kursk and also in Kiev. And this is the stack that's there, about 45 or 50 units. The Russians did build. They've got about 40 units themselves now. They did do a build. But next turn, they've got 62 to spend. Well, they're going to have to, or is it maybe 52? I can't recall. The Americans were able to lend Lee's 10 IPP. So they're going to have to build a fortification in Moscow or lose it but they've got right now currently no forces in Stalingrad, no forces in Novosibirsk. They're holding tight here. They're still playing a little bit of ping pong here, in Valpuri, and it won't be long before this Stachs sitting in East Poland punches its way through and completely takes Leningrad, which is going to flip Spain. Spain will become pro-Axis. And actually, I've said it a mistake a few times, but Sweden actually only converts or flips when Moscow is taken and the Germans have control of all of these sort of Baltic area of Denmark, Norway, and I believe all of Finland as well. So that's kind of what's happening. It's going to be very interesting. Never had this scenario where the Italian Navy is in the Atlantic, but Turkey is going to be annexed next term if the British can do a landing in Greece, and also that will also then allow them to annex Turkey. So there's substantial. There's a couple more boats there. There's a couple fighters there, and some more ground units. So the Germans are going to have to decide what they want to do. Are they going to just preemptively take out these 4 ground units there that are sitting? What's this territory in Istanbul? So that's going to be interesting there. Not sure what I'm going to do yet, but round 6 coming up should be very, very interesting. So stay tuned, folks. And oh yes, the Anzac fleet out down here is still hiding. Not sure what they're going to do. They are currently outclassed by this larger contingent of the Japanese. So, oh yes, the Japanese did build a, what do you call this? An amphibious tank to do some landing. So that's a new unit the Japanese built. So that's all I got, folks. And stay tuned for round 6.